like to call this meeting of West Milwaukee School Board to order. I'm going to lead us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. So before we do our roll call this evening, we're going to do our ceremonial swearing in of our newly elected board members. Before we begin, just want to mention that Mr. Becker was officially sworn in April 19th. He's here attending the meeting virtually this evening. So we're going to start with Ms. Lee. So you,
Rebecca Lee, board member Lee, can you please step forward. I, Rebecca Lee, having been elected to the office of West Allis, West Milwaukee School Board, but not yet entered upon the duties thereof, but have not yet entered upon the duties thereof, swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin, and will faithfully discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability. I, Jeff Sikich, having been elected to the office of West Allis, West Milwaukee School Board, but have not yet entered upon the duties thereof, swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin, and will faithfully discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability.
all right, thank you very much. So with that, Suzette, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Ms. Deal. Present. Mr. Sikich.
Present.
Mr. Keller.
Here.
Mrs. Carr.
Here.
Mr. Burns.
Present.
Mrs. Lee. Here. Mrs. Kaiser.
Here.
Mr. Becker.
Here. Present.
And President Lee.
Am I screaming?
Here. Proper notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the open meeting laws of the state of Wisconsin. Are there any modifications to the agenda this evening?
We have no changes.
All right, with that, we'll move on to item 7, our superintendent's report.
Great. Thank you and good evening, everyone. And like we did a couple meetings ago, we're getting ourselves reintroduced with our high school representatives. And this evening, we have a representative from Hale High School. So go ahead and introduce yourself to the board and the public and share your report.
All right. Hello, my name is Gavin Graham. I am senior class president at Hale High School. I've had perfect attendance throughout the past 4 years of high school. I competed in athletics and participated in extracurricular activities throughout my 4 years at Hale. I plan to major in actuarial science, but I'm still undecided on the college I plan to choose to go. I would like to thank you for giving us the opportunity to share a few great things going on at Hale High School this evening. We just started off our Spirit Week of dress-up days leading up to the prom dance this Saturday at the Italian Community Center in the 3rd Ward, catered by Bartolotas. We have about 350 students that will be attending the dance. We are having special days this week that include Pajama Day and Jersey Day. The SpongeBob musical cast and crew had a great opening weekend of performances with additional shows this week, April 28th and April 29th at 7 p.m. and May 1st at 2 p.m. Student achievements this year. Following the district solo ensemble back in February. Nathan Hale had a huge amount of musicians qualify for the state music solo and ensemble May 7th at Cardinal Stretch University. The FCCLA student organization had many state winners. Those winners are Brianna Ramirez, Miley Burdick, Paul Newak, Callan Outson, Evan Olenek. Additionally, there were 2 winners from the State Fair Young People's Art Exhibit. Both winners placed first place in the senior high school division. They are Emily Higgins, who won first place in the totally textile category, and Vincenza O'Grady, who won first place in the color wheel inspired category with her self-portrait. And congratulations to Tioni Dallas, 11th grader, as she was selected for the Badgers Girls State Award. Sport updates. The spring sports season is underway with all teams now in full competition. The varsity baseball team has won 3 games in a row. Last Thursday, they beat Hamilton 10-3, followed by a beating Lakeland 14-3 and Waupun 5-3 in a tournament at Waupun this past weekend. The girls soccer team began the season 3-2 as they went on a 3-game win streak with wins over South Milwaukee, Cudahy, and Milwaukee School of Arts, followed by a tough loss against Oak Creek 2-1 last week. Boys track and field, 2nd out of 11 teams at the Kenosha Bradford Invite on Saturday. Girls track and field finished 3rd out of 11 teams at that same invite. There have been outstanding performances by many this season, led by Julia Klein in the pole vault, Lee Aiza Hayes in the long jump, Nidsamar Zavala in the 100-meter hurdles, Mikey Lee in the hurdles, Colin Rashka and Alex White in the 1,600-meter run, and Ty Green in the 100-meter run. Last Thursday, the Hale golf team beat New Berlin West in a head-to-head duel competition. Top team scorers were Tyler Pronzinski, Danny Staskunas, Declan Hoffman, and Jacob Kaczorowski. The team also competed in the 11-team Watertown Invite, defeating both the Watertown and Hamilton team. The Lady Huskies softball team had an exciting win against Tosa last week, 16-6 in 6 innings. The boys tennis team has a strong top 3 singles group of Nathan Stringer, Dominic Gregg, and Ben Fix. Nathan is leading the way with a 5-1 overall record so far this season. Past highlights from this school year in sports. I went on to state in wrestling, and the Hale dance team went on to state as well during the seasons. Alex White went to state in cross country in the fall as well. Last week, the Nathan Hale High School Athletic Department recognized our student athletes who are moving on to college next year and competing in intercollegiate athletics. The students that participated were Lucas Collins, Ella Galashevsky, Hannah Hadaha, Julia Klein, Carson Shane, Troy Starich, Nathan Stringer, Cole Vahovic, and Alex White.
All right, I'm going to take over for a second. We're supposed to have a second student here, but there was 6 pages all of a sudden. I said so you can catch his breath. So I have teacher achievements. So we've had a number of different things, and I think it was going to be on the docket for Dr. Lexman to read, but I'm going to steal that thunder here. So congratulations goes out to April Ellery on being selected as a Herb Cole Educational Foundation Fellowship 2022 winner. And I don't know if you know this, but the applicants go through 2 selection committees, reviews to narrow them to the official winners at the state level. In the end, those teachers selected were chosen for their superior ability to inspire love of learning in their students, their ability to motivate others, and their leadership and service within and outside the classroom. So definitely Miss Ellery exemplifies these qualities to a high level. She was one of only 117 teachers recognized statewide for this honor. And to put it in perspective, there are over 50,000 teachers in the entire state of Wisconsin. So quite the accomplishment. So once again, congratulations to Miss Ellery on the well-deserved award. Congratulations goes out to English teacher Deb Bukowski as well on being selected as our Nathan Hale Metropolitan Milwaukee Alliance of Black School Educators Teacher of the Year. She was nominated for dedication and passion to teaching and learning, engaging students in a variety of activities where student ownership and voice are promoted in her classroom, and really building outstanding relationships with both students and colleagues, giving them guidance and support they need to achieve success. And the last person is Laurel Noack Boyd. She's a science teacher at Nathan Hale, and we're just honoring her tonight too, on her research that she conducted with others at the Field Museum in Chicago to analyze egg laying dates of birds over time, which now has been published in the Journal of Animal Ecology. So she got published with a group of other scientists in Chicago area. They saw that many species of birds were laying eggs earlier in response to changes in local climate. And also the work has been written up in the Chicago Tribune, the Guardian, and a few other mainstream media as well. So that's a neat thing. Or you want me to take that one? Okay. Nathan Hale students and staff have been busy throughout the year with community service. There's a variety of things students can get involved in through the clubs that they're involved in. But just some of the things are, we've had 2 blood drives this year. So they've went off phenomenally. Annual Thanksgiving food drive, the Target holiday event, decorating and doing the funds for the MAC Fund at Candy Cane Lane, boxing food for the Rotary Pantry. So they do that weekly, every Wednesday. We have students from the Rotary Club go do that. Students were involved in a MAC Fund run through Spanish National Honor Society, Spanish interpreters for the Christmas Clearinghouse Council Toy Shop. And then most recently, we did a NHS Spring Toy Drive, and then followed that up with a highway cleanup for Earth Day just this past weekend. And I mean, I closed out by saying compassion and support for others in need are important attributes that we try to instill in all our students. And it's just really rewarding for the students to see a smile going on people's faces when they're helping out.
Coming up is Teacher Appreciation Week. We want to take this opportunity to thank all of our teachers for all that you do each and every day to support us students, our families, the schools, and our districts. We have a lot to be proud of here in West Allis, and it starts with the outstanding teaching staff that we have. The Nathan Hale PTSA School Administration and National Honor Society Student Group have a special week of celebration for Teacher Appreciation Week, including breakfast, lunch, and small gifts of appreciation throughout next week. Once again, we thank the teachers for all that they do.
So I'll take the last couple things since it pertains to gentlemen like Gavin here. We have our academic awards night coming up. And so it's exciting that we're able to get back in kind of the normal sequence a little bit here. So in the past, we've had a junior and senior recognition in our gymnasium with a dinner. And so we're going back to that banquet style. So that'll be a great thing. So that's going to be June 2nd. So those juniors and seniors that meet honor roll from last year, second semester and first semester this year, because we don't have the second semester yet because we're not at the end of the year. And then also scholarships, criteria and other special awards, they will be invited and celebrated that evening. And then on that same June 2nd day of the junior and seniors, we're going to do a freshman sophomore during the day in the auditorium. So just a little bit different there. And there's about 300 students that will be recognized for freshmen and sophomores. And then we'll do a little reception in the commons for them during the school day. So, but we look forward to getting back into the celebrating our successes and bringing students and families together. And then farewell to the class of 2022. We won't be back at this table here before that period of time. So the days are winding down for our graduating seniors as we close one chapter of their life and open up another. We wish them much success as they pursue their future degrees and entrance into the military or directly into the workforce. We're looking forward to an exciting culmination to the school year and celebration of their successes. Graduation is set for Saturday, June 11th at 11 a.m. But I have to say, by the end of the week, the decision will be made whether it's inside or outside. There's some discussion around that and which way we go. So we've been talking as a group here, and I've been meeting with the senior council, and so by the end of the week, we should have that hunkered down so we can commit to one or the other with families. But we look forward to seeing any of you and all of you if you can fit that in your schedule. And I know a few of the board members are usually assigned to that day to help with distribution of the diplomas. So we appreciate that. And once again, we'll have anybody that wants to come, any board members will have some reserved parking, reserved seating and things like that. So you don't have to scramble around and park in the neighborhood and hoof it over. So, but we're looking forward to that great celebration. But yeah, that's our spiel. Tried to reflect on kind of the year and focus on the fourth quarter, but we appreciate you letting us come forward and share some of the great things we're doing here at Hale. And any questions at all or any?
Awesome. Great. Thank you both so much. All right. All the best.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
That's great. All right, we're going to 7.2, the superintendent's report. So that's the legislative update. There's a lot of information here. I won't read all the background, but the governor vetoed a number of K-12 education bills. So Assembly Bill 963, which is the Parents' Bill of Rights. It's a bill that has a template that's being passed in some places and signed into law in different states in the country, but not in Wisconsin. Assembly Bill 966 was to reorganize Milwaukee Public Schools, so that was vetoed. Assembly Bill 970 would have eliminated the income limits and the pupil participation limits for the statewide parental choice program for private schools that charge tuition and participate in the school choice program. Senate Bill 585 was vetoed, and that would have required reporting certain crimes and other incidents that occur on school property. And then Senate Bill 695 was vetoed. That would have changed the number of independent charter schools authorized by the Menominee Nation or the Ojibwe Community College. And so those were not passed in terms of, some of the education action taking place at the state level. We'll go to 7.3, which is district recognitions for this evening. So at Horace Mann, physical education teacher Brian Marks started the morning mile with Horace Mann students. Students gather in the morning before school to run a mile. Every 5 miles, runners earn a shoe charm for their necklace. And Spectrum News 1 did a nice story on it. It's linked here in what's available online for the school board documents. Also, Jenny Day and Brian Marks again partnered with the Pettit National Ice Center and invited Olympians to teach some of our students how to inline skate in the gym. And so there's a link there for some photos. Then the music department, there's lots of recognitions here. I'm not going to read all of the names, but what I do want to highlight is our students did very well in the District Solo Ensemble Festival in February. So we had students from Hale Central, Dotke Lane, FLW, and West Milwaukee participated with students from 5 other nearby districts. And all of the levels of gold and silver and bronze medals that were awarded. So overall, we did extremely well, and a whole bunch of our students are recognized by name. And then Mary Pat also wants to do a very special thank you to our district music educators who prepared 3 district-wide, so all district music festival concerts. So usually there's one a year and they rotate. So there's a band, there's a choir, there's an orchestra, and they rotate. And when Mary Pat and I met and talked about this, she thought, well, after 2 years, now we're way off track. So what if we just did them all in 1 year and then we're back on track? I don't think we realized how much work that was going to be for all the music teachers. They really put in a lot of extra hours. And so we're trying to figure out, is there's some way to honor that, but this is part of it, to just say thank you, because I think it was powerful that we could come together with 2,000 people at a time, 3,000 people at a time, and really have the experience of supporting our musicians. And then again, the Herb Cole Fellowship winners. So it's there. We have 3, and what Matt didn't mention, so 3 out of 50,000 teachers in the state, is that the teacher receives $6,000, and so does the school. So the teacher can use those dollars for their classroom. So it's really pretty exciting. And so Dave Dolnick at Central, Aaron Dreska at Irving, and April Ellery at Nathan Hale. And then Roberta Luna is a student that was also recognized by the Cole Education Foundation. So a lot of thanks to the foundation and the Herb Cole himself for investing in education in the state of Wisconsin. Yes, the very top one for the music department. Sorry, thanks, Noah. So the Wisconsin School Music Association recently announced their 2022 Student Composition Project Award winners, taking first place in the music arranging category. So first place, Indigonium Forge was arranged by Ethan Pollock from Frank Lloyd Wright Intermediate School, and Mary Pat Michaels is his orchestra teacher. And that's quite a big honor, especially an intermediate school student to win first place in music arranging. It says a lot about the quality of music education we provide here. And then finally, it's just some updates and information items. So for response to public comments from our last meeting on April 11th, we heard from 3 members of the public during that meeting. 2 spoke against any future referendum for facilities, and President Lee responded and clarified information that, you know, there might be a future referendum, but no decisions have been made. And then the 3rd member of the public asked that we promote junior football, which has been done now, and we'll get ahead of that a little bit better going forwards and make sure we support our junior sports programs. And then a couple other updates. Last week, we hosted a large team of educators from CISA 2. So the executive director was here, some other representatives, and then some superintendents and other educators from the CISA 2 area. That is the Whitewater area. So just a little bit of sense of where that is in the state. They joined us to better understand our deeper learning work and project-based learning work and the SEL work that we're doing, because they're interested in using our schools for site visits for other school leaders in CISA 2 to really kind of inspire innovative teaching and learning experiences at schools. So it was pretty interesting to have them with us. I want to thank Deidre and her team for organizing all of that. We look forward to working with them and other visitors in the future. My own kind of personal goal around those kind of visits is in part to share what we're doing. We're proud of the work we're doing. We're proud of the work our teachers are doing. And we, the opportunity to share that is powerful, but it's also a little bit of self-serving. And they joined us for the leadership team meeting this past Thursday. And what I explained to everybody is that they're going to see things in our work that we can't see because we're in it all the time. They're going to ask questions about our work that we don't even know to ask because we see it all the time. And their presence will make us better, right? So in terms of our continuous improvement journey, it's an opportunity to push the work even further for us. So when we have the opportunity to invite people in, we do. And then today, we're having our first workshop on intermediate and elementary school consolidation. The second one will be next Monday, May 2nd. The focus tonight is really reviewing kind of the facility planning process that leads to a recommendation that would consolidate Lane and Longfellow. That's kind of the focus for tonight of that conversation. Next week is actually will be, I think, more detail, more in-depth kind of analysis that really works through a whole bunch of what-if scenarios, because the facility master plan, if the board continues to go down the path of what was approved, would move us to 1 high school, including the project-based and shared journeys. So adopting shared journeys, but 1 high school, 2 intermediates, 8 elementaries, right? So that we're continuing to move down the road of our facility master plan. And some of that is to match, you know, enrollment to the number of students we serve, and so that there are fewer old buildings that we have to figure out how to repair and improve. But as we've been explaining, no decisions have been made yet. That really is the board's work to give us some direction. But the sooner we get some direction, the better plan we can put in place to transition families, kids, and our teachers. So that concludes the superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we'll move on to our public comments this evening. As a reminder, each person who would like to address the board will have 3 minutes to do so. They must sign up via the electronic form, which if you are watching, listening via Zoom, has been linked in the chat. So if you'd like to address the board, please sign up there. Each person will have 3 minutes. I said that already. You must state your name and address before you begin your comments. The board will not have any sort of discussion, no back and forth. But if there is a question that can be readily answered or clarification can be made, that will be done, but there will be no additional questions after the allotted 3-minute time is up. So I will start with the list as we usually have here. Get the timer going here. So we have Mr. John Malling.
Good evening. My name is John Malling, 3850 South Pole Drive. I'd like to read a section from Imprimis from Hillsdale College. It's written by Jason Riley. He's an African-American He's a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute and a columnist for the Wall Street Journal. This quote in this part of this is, "Schools exist for the education of children. Schools do not exist to provide ironclad jobs for teachers, billions of dollars in union dues for teachers' unions, monopolies for educational bureaucracies, a guaranteed market for graduates of teacher colleges, or a captive audience for indoctrinators." You just passed a 16.7 pay increase for everybody. Everyone in the school district. My question is to you, whatever happened to the pay for performance? 4.7% increase in salary, 5% for dental, 7% for health insurance, equals 2.5 million for salaries, 1.9 million for benefits, for a total of $4.4 million. This cost is now permanently baked into the pie that you have to pay for year to year. I believe that was an obnoxious pay increase. Jane, have you ever had a 4.7% increase? How about you, Brian?
Mr. Malling,
No, I'm just asking.
by board policy, you can only address
All right,
questions. to me.
anybody on the board here?
You can't address other board members, only me.
4.7% pay increase. I'd like to put $1,000 on the table and almost guarantee you that you haven't. I will guarantee you haven't. I'd win that bet. The average consumer price index that you talked about the previous 9 years was 1.5%. You more than tripled that in 1 year. That's disgusting. Somebody said NPS is doing it. When has NPS ever done anything that you wanted to emulate? We should do better than that. Why are you handing out money like it's candy at a parade? Brendan, you said during the last meeting, quote, "We keep getting accused of being fiscally irresponsible. Would we be irresponsible to go all the way up to 4.7? Yeah, you would be. You would be. You also said that you usually do sign the contracts before you made that decision. Well, it was a bribe. You did this reverse. You made that decision before the contracts went out so the teachers would know what they're getting. There's a saying out there that says, socialism dies when you run out of other people's money. Think about it. Finally, again, I don't want you to come back after this increase and say, you know what, we're 5 million short. We're running short on the budget. We might have to have another referendum, or we're going to have to cut sports or music or some such thing. The public doesn't fall for that anymore. So you better make your budgets do what they're supposed to do and not ask for an increase. Thank you.
Just one clarification, the only thing that was passed during the last meeting was the 4.7 CPI. Nothing else was passed beyond that. All right, Mr. Joe Mikolajczyk.
Joe Mikolajczyk, 3355 South Russell Court, New Berlin. I was curious why 10 to 15 teachers were at the last school board meeting, and now I know why. It is just another example of this school board representing the teachers union and school administration, not taxpayers and parents. It is just another case of fiscal mismanagement and irresponsibility. At the last meeting on April 11th, this board shamefully voted to raise teachers and all employees' pay the maximum amount allowable under state law, 4.7%. This great gift to all school district employees will cost taxpayers approximately $2.5 million a year. And to really insult the taxpayers and let everyone know who you represent, the entire board and Mr. Unelected Educrat Lexman applauded all the teachers in the audience at the meeting after taking the unanimous vote to raise their pay. This is absolutely disgusting, and you should be ashamed of your actions. However, I know you are not. Past behavior is an indication of future, a prediction of future behavior. Your past behavior and actions for well over 5 years has been fiscal irresponsibility, mismanagement, and utter disregard for the public's money. I have no doubt you will continue to waste and fritter away millions of taxpayer dollars. Now I'm going to describe how you shamefully failed to even pretend to exercise reasonable legal and fiscal judgment, which, by the way, you are required to do under the law. On April 8th, 2022 at 3:45, you held a special closed meeting titled Opening of Negotiations Teachers. On April 8th, 2022 at 4:15, you held another closed meeting titled Opening of Negotiation Educational Assistance. No further meetings were held between the unions and the school district after these April 8th meetings. And at the April 11th board meeting, you unanimously approved the 4.7 wage increase for all employees. That must have been some very tough negotiations. You had 30 minutes of time allotted to tell these unions, we will give you the maximum raises possible. How does that sound to you? That is our final offer. Take it or leave it. You are some really shrewd negotiators, really working on behalf of the public. My opinion is these actions are the least in complete disregard of public money, and at the worst may not be legal. You are disgusting, each and every one of you who voted for that. You are certainly all teachers union and administration lackeys. Yes, that's right, lackeys. And your actions certainly prove that. Any questions? I didn't think so.
As a reminder,
Any wise comments?
I don't see anyone else signed up for public comments at this time. If there's anyone who would like to sign up that joined the Zoom meeting late, I would leave 30 seconds for you to do so. All right, seeing anyone else sign up, I will close public comments at this time. We'll move on to item 9, the board reports, starting with 9.1, review of the board calendar. So today is April 25th. We have our regular Board of Education meeting. We swore in our newly elected officials. And then immediately following, we have a workshop, which is our school consolidation workshop, part 1. Then on Monday, May 2nd at 6 p.m., we have our school consolidation workshop, part 2. These both workshops are open to the public, but there are no public comments on workshop only meetings, just as a reminder. May 9th at 6 p.m., we have a regular Board of Education meeting, and then immediately following a workshop, guaranteed and viable curriculum. On May 16th at 6 p.m., we have a workshop, our communication committee workshop. And then on May 23rd at 6 p.m., we have a regular Board of Education meeting. So move on to our board committee reports, 9.2.1, employment and culture, Mr. Keller.
Okay, we met on, excuse me, April 19th. It was a brief update. There's a lot of things going on that's taking a lot of time and resources currently, but we have our 2022-23 contract update. Contracts were distributed via email on April 14th. As of April 18th, over 180 of those had been returned. Accepted, I'm sorry. Individuals do have until May 11th to accept. We also talked about the early retirement program final report. Those individuals had until April 8th. We had 8 of 20 individuals accept the program. The last thing we talked about was the compensation model. Part of that compensation model that we had was a request to have salary reevaluated. There have been a number, about 125 actually, requests as of that meeting. So those are being scheduled and gone through right now. And that's our update.
Well, all right, thank you very much. Anyone have any questions for Brian or the committee? Or any topics you'd like to bring up for the next meeting and the agenda? No, seeing none, then we'll move on to 9.2.2, our financial stability and efficiency report from Ms. Carr.
The Financial Stability and Efficiency Committee met on Thursday, April 21st. Caitlin shared that the business services team is in the process of reviewing and refreshing our risk management procedures because we are always in a continuous improvement mode. She gave several examples of what this entails. For example, the business services took a look at our current procedures for staff or parents transporting students, disposal of school property, including both equipment and instructional property, animals in the building, and donations and fundraising. They also updated our procedures for transactions involving cash handling. The business services team reviewed the current procedures and the safeguards, and then updated the practices and created a timeline to roll out the updates to secretaries, principals, and staff.
All right, thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Carr, the committee? Anything they'd like to bring up in the next meeting? I actually did have one thing, if we could look into. So one of the items which I would really like for the referendum was the fact that we were adding in buses for after-school late buses. And I'd like to see if we could look into the cost of doing that, like currently, basically moving forward, to see if it might be able to help expand participation in our sports and extra co-curricular activities.
Okay.
All right, so if nothing else, we'll move on. So 9.3 board member reports of community events. Any board events that we went to that we want to talk about today? Jeff?
I'd like to give a shout out to Jason Pollard and the cast and crew from SpongeBob, the musical. I could not make it, but my wife and my daughter and the two grandkids went, and they just loved it.
I have heard some rave reviews about it.
Yep,
So
I was gonna,
Amy, did you go? as
yeah, I
well?
was gonna second it. I was just gonna say, hey, if I took my 8-year-old Sunday, it was, I thought it was great. It was wonderful. If you can make it, like, I think we already had it in the Hale things, but just, was it Thursday and Friday at 7 PM, Sunday at 2 PM. So if you can go, it's a fabulous show. I mean, I was just overwhelmed with how talented we have, students we have in our district and our staff. I mean, the props are just, it was amazing. It was a very good show. Yeah, so.
Yeah, I went as well, and I was amazed. So I was looking at the booklet and going, oh my gosh, freshmen. We have a lot of young talent too. So that was a wonderful to see. And usually when you go to a musical, there's always a voice that kind of stands out and you're like, oh my gosh, stole the show. There were so many wonderful voices in this particular musical. I was so taken aback. Boys as well as girls singing their hearts out, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
anyone else? Yes, Kristen.
I'm going on Friday. I was the pleasure of representing the West Dallas, West Milwaukee School District at the West Dallas Community Improvement Foundation's annual charity gala. It benefited Exploit No More's Freedom House. They support and provide resources to survivors of sex trafficking. It was a phenomenal event. $22,000 was raised last night alone. I'm not even sure how much was raised between the various auctions, but it was a wonderful, wonderful gala. If next year, I encourage everyone to attend or donate. It was a phenomenal event put on. Former board member Stephanie Emons was on the committee, so it was wonderful to see that.
Yes, it was a fantastic event. It actually sold out weeks ago, the tickets for it. So it was very well supported by the community, and thank you for being able to attend as I was unable to. So thank you for that. Any other events people would like to talk about? All right, thank you very much. Move on to item 10, our consent agenda. So we have item 10.1, approval of minutes from our regular board meeting on April 11th, 2022, and our board workshop meeting from April 18th, 2022. We have the employment, item 10.2, the employment summary, item 10.3, supplementary contracts, and item 10.4, the financial summary. Does anyone need anything separated out? If not, I'd look for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion?
Yeah, move fast, Rebecca.
Like, obviously.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
We get Joe's vote as well.
Aye.
Joe, getting a thumbs up if you're an aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? All right, that passes. So let's move on to our first action item, 11.1, authority for administrators to issue final non-renewal notices to teachers. Ms. Marshall?
Good evening. What you have before you is just part of our annual contract process. And it is to proceed with the notification of non-renewals.
Any questions? So just for Rebecca and Joe, this is a normal thing we do every year. It's required that we do this, but it's just kind of something that we have to do. So if no questions, Joe, do you have any questions?
No,
You're good
yeah, no questions.
for a motion then?
Move to
Second,
All right, moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
aye.
That passes.
Thank you.
On item 11.2, approval of the district library plan 2022 to 2025. See, Ms. Raymond, Mr. Engel, Mr. Miller, and Mr. Kelly.
We actually have some other special guests with us this evening. So Jenny Neighbor and Julie Smith, who both serve as our district librarians, are with us this evening as well. I'm with Mr. Kelly, who leads the work of our district innovation coaches and oversees our library plan. So our library plan should get periodically updated. It's one of those things that has been we have been working on for a while and wanted to bring one forward sooner than now, but in the last 2 years, we've made all sorts of adjustments to our plans. So tonight we're proud to bring that forward, and I'm going to get out of the way and let these guys share some of the things that they've added to the plan and some of the focus of the plan for the next several years.
It pops up here real quick. We'll try to be as quick as we can with this presentation. It is a lot of information. So my name is Brendan Kelly. I'm the innovation coach at Wilson Elementary. I'm also the lead innovation coach in the district.
I'm Julie Smith. I'm the innovation coach at Lightning Intermediate.
And I'm Jenny Neighbor and the innovation coach at Nathan Hale.
Yep, and Julie and Jenny are both our certified librarians in our district as well. So the first thing is, why are we here? Update our current library plan to make sure we have one that is updated and current with DPI. It is a requirement of DPI, and it is a guide and reference for our purchasing items that support our library plan. So we do get funds for common school funds from the state, and this document that we create allows us to align those funds with the goals that we created. So to create this, we use the Future Ready framework. There's one that is specific to libraries. So we use the DPI's model. We're just going to break down these sections for you. We use that framework because it allows us to create a vision and a plan and then implement it all together. And then we can be reflective on that process too along the 3 years. So it also aligns with the Wisconsin Digital Learning Plan that they have. So it goes hand in hand with both of those. These are the different areas that you break the plan down into. I'm not going to read them to you right now because we're going to kind of dive into a little bit of it. We wanted to give you an overview of some of it because I'm sure not a lot of you know what our libraries kind of bring to the table in our district or what some of the funds are used for. So we just wanted to kind of highlight some of those. So the first area we're going to highlight is curriculum, instruction, and assessment. So there's 3 main parts of this. One is curates digital resources. It leads in the selection, integration, and organization of sharing of digital resources and tools to support transformational teaching and learning. That's a huge part of what we've been trying to bring up lately. The next one is empower students as creators. So a huge part of our library is also to have tools and resources available for students to be creative with their learning. We'll talk about a lot of those tools that we're kind of bringing in along the lines of maker spaces and things. Real world problem solving ties right in with PBL and our deeper learning. And the last one is builds instructional partnerships. And we're going to dive into that too. So some of the things that we have as far as digital resources in our that are paid for by common school funds or our library plan. We have things like Destiny, which allows us to have an inventory on all of our school libraries. Also Discovery Education, which is a database of videos of science, math, social studies that students can watch district-wide. Image Quest, we just have it's a website where we can have copyright-free images for students to use so we don't get in legal trouble that way, and students also can learn about using other people's works. A new one that we have is Beanstack that we kind of signed up with, and also BadgerLink, which is a state sponsored one. In high school, intermediate, and elementary, we also have site-specific resources such as Noodle Tools, that's more for secondary and intermediate, and BrainPop, which is another video platform, and BrainPop Junior. We also have Pebble Go for younger students that just need a different database to look for information The next area, empower students as creators. We've also been aligning our library more with makerspace and innovation spaces. And I think a lot of schools have been highlighting these, but we're able to use some of these common school funds as long as the makerspace and innovation space is actually physically attached to the library. We can use funds to do that. There are very strict guidelines of what you can use these common school funds on. You can't just buy whatever, you can't buy furniture, but you can buy resources and databases and tools. So we've done a lot of purchasing around that as well. So 3D printing, glow forges, laser cutters. We have a couple of those. We have some Cricuts, some Lego kits, sewing machines, all for creativity aspects for students. We're also kind of looking into the robotics and computer science. We've made some investments in common school funds district-wide as far as having Sphero robots for every school. So each school has a kit. So we're trying to go across that everyone has equal access to that, not if their school chose to do it or not. Builds instructional partnerships. That's another big area where we do coach. All innovation coaches are coaches. We also co-plan, co-teach with students or with teachers as well. And there's a distinction between elementary and secondary. Elementary innovation coaches do have a standalone class where they do teach a standalone library and technology class. And secondary teachers are in charge of the library and they do a lot more coaching and co-planning and co-teaching. Sorry, I'm talking really fast here.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Do you want us to save questions to the end if we have any, or do you want them as you go along?
You can shout out anything you'd like. That's fine. If you have one.
It's up to the presenters.
We're okay with it. Yeah, feel
Okay.
free. I don't mind at all.
Can I shout out a question?
Anyone has a,
I did have one question.
Yeah.
So for all the different database, the things that you listed as far as having access to images and videos and things like that, do we evaluate annually or every certain amount of time to determine how much use each one is getting? And then are some of these free versus some have like a paid subscription associated with them that we evaluate, you know, I guess usage versus cost sort of thing each year? Because I presume that there might be lots of opportunities out there for these sorts of things that maybe some might be better than others.
You're absolutely right. And that's a great question because that's one of our goals. So I should have waited till the end. No, we do have a goal of that. And you're going to see that in one of our categories here where we want to make sure that we are evaluating them those yearly and have a committee to do so. Because we know there are, like, especially after COVID, there's so many more digital resources available and you don't know what you don't know. So having, you know, a team of teachers that's looking like what is the best, you know, for the money we're going to spend at that. We do look at usage and we do look at, you know, talking to teachers, are you using this or not? And we've caught a lot of things that we don't, but we want to, you know, we wanted a procedure in place too. So that's a goal that we wrote in here. For it. So it's a great question.
Yeah, and just to add to that, we also adjusted. So when we adopted a new 4K through 5th grade, thank you, elementary resource last year, it came with a lot of digital subscriptions. And so then we could drop some of the ones that we were paying for through common school funds or other sources so that everything was aligned. So every time we add something, we always make a point to say what we're already using could we drop, because this now replaces some of those things as well.
Yeah, and we don't want to keep continuing, you know, to buy the same thing over and over with different vendors. So yeah, so one of the things here is we, through this process, will evaluate areas of growth and then make a growth plan, which is our goal. DPI suggests 1 to 3 goals overall. I think we have 14. We're doing a lot of this already and we want to continue to do it. And we want to actually say we're doing it. And since we haven't had an active plan for a few years, we really want to dive into it. It's important work. So some of them might be smaller, some of them overlap, but we think the goals that we do have are important. There's some areas of growth that we haven't made a goal for, but we just want to identify that. So the next time, maybe that's a bigger option that we want to look into. So evaluate library curriculum and develop a scope and sequence for guaranteed viable curriculum, GVC, as an update as needed. So I know in 2 weeks, you're going to be meeting about the GVC. So one of our goals is to have a tech GVC for 4K through 5th grade, which we will be sharing in 2 weeks on there. So we've been making a lot of work in that. So that's a goal that we already are working on that we would hope to accomplish by the end of the summer. The next area we have is personalized professional learning, the next sliver. Keep going really fast here because there's a lot of slivers. So this is Leeds professional learning to cultivate broader understanding of the skills that compromise success in a digital age. So what we do currently is we have staff meetings and presentations, PD presentations, instructional technology coaching and co-teaching, and on-demand support. There's a lot of that. And then we also have district-wide tech tips and instructional tips posted for different schools. So those are some of the things we do for professional learning. Area for growth here is we would like to have more of a survey for staff to find out specific areas of interest. So we want to make sure that every school, the innovation coach, is having a survey of where can we help you, and have maybe a standardized one for the district, and then each school put that out so that their innovation coach can have tailored PD that way. And we can also maybe offer it in a flip model so that maybe someone who is more knowledgeable on a subject could actually do like a video, and then they could watch that or give support that way. And then you know who to talk to more. So that is where our growth plan came and our goal. So we'll survey staff and determine specific areas of need and the opportunities to learn about it.
So,
Yes,
any
Jane.
way, are we combining micro credentials in any way for offering mini classes or anything like that?
We haven't talked about that, but I mean, that could be some option.
Just wondering, just throwing that out there, you know.
Like it,
Yeah,
yes.
so the PD committee right now identified their priorities for the next round of micro credentials, but
Okay.
the integration of technology tools came up about halfway through the year. So we anticipate offering a smaller micro credential catalog this summer, because that's what the teachers were asking us for. And then in the fall, we'll go back to expanding it a bit, and likely it'll include something around that integration of some of the tech tools that we have.
Yeah, and a lot of this too is going to be, we have a sewing machine in the library and you have a kid that wants to use it. Like, how can I support you to have, a quilting project or whichever? Like, I know nothing about quilting, but maybe we have this tool that we can help you with, and finding the best person for it. So it's not necessarily like a continued education thing. It just might be a project you would like help working on. Because I know I've been collaborating a lot with Franklin and a couple other schools using the Cool Forge laser cutter, because they have these projects that they want to do where kids are cutting some cool stuff out, but they don't have one and they don't have the skills to do it. So it's stuff like that where we'd like to learn more about it. So does that make sense? Cool. All right, robust infrastructure provides and advocates for equitable access to collection tools using digital resources, programming, and services to support the school district's strategic vision. So we've implemented district-wide databases. This kind of overlaps with the curriculum and instruction. So in all levels, and we help support our current technology plan by giving students daily access to technology outside of the plan. So if they need a loaner device, if something's not working, we need to fix a keyboard, we have some devices available that way that are common school funds, but aren't through the technology plan currently. And for this one, we identified find ways to inform teachers and students about the resources in our libraries. So that's kind of ties in with that other one, right? We have these resources. How can we get the word out, and how can we get the teachers using them a little bit more? So continue to open collaboration with Technology Department 2 and District Technology Planning to provide an updated high-speed internet. There's also a growth plan that kind of ties in there too. But we also are the first go-to person for teachers saying, hey, there's a website that students have access to that maybe we shouldn't. So then we talk to the tech department and we look into it. Some kid, like cool math games is a big one. So that one is used as an incentive and we don't want to block it, but we want to have some conversations around it. So I'm just making sure that we're collaborating with the tech department on all of those things too. It's a goal to keep moving forward. All right, I'm going to hand this over so I can take a breath. This is gonna be Jenny.
It's gonna take a breath.
Yeah.
So one of the big chunks is budget and resources. And we, in this chunk, it talks about investing strategically in digital resources. We use common school funds a great deal in investing in digital resources. It's great that we have those common school funds because that is an expense, and that is not then at the school district level. It's the state provides common school funds for us to invest in those things. And like Brendan said before, there are certain things that we can only spend the money on. And we have to make sure that we keep a really good record of what it is, because it can be audited.
And we have that.
And yeah, we have that. Yeah, at our level, we make a spreadsheet and then it gets approved at the district level, and we have a process and procedure set for that. Yeah, go ahead. So these are all the things we currently do where we seek the input from students and staff. It's not just based on what we think. We want to serve best the community in our school. So we make sure that we ask what people need in our building to be successful. And we utilize Destiny to keep track of everything. That's our catalog. We also use free resources though. So we've discovered, BadgerLink is something through the, that Wisconsin provides for its districts, thank you. And so we're getting more into Badger Link and seeing what it has to offer. So if there's things that it has to offer, we might be spending money on, then we can better use that money in a different area.
And Beanstack's another one that DPI just purchased for the entire state. So that we're getting on board with that to try it out. And we're actually partnering with the PTA council on that too.
So we also use our CSF in conjunction with our tech plan to make sure that we support that as well. And then, so our goal is to, well, our area for growth is to understand the impact of current resources and what other resources are available. So that goes to answer the question. And we want to have that committee, making sure that that committee has eyes on what we're using and making sure that they're valuable resources and we are not wasting that money, but it's put to good use. And then some of the things that we have to look at when we are selecting materials is there's a Wisconsin administrative code and a Wisconsin state statute. Plus also we do use our district library media material selection guidelines that was school board approved. It's quite an extensive list. I don't know if there are 18 different areas to the guidelines and then some specific procedures that we go through. So it's not that we're selecting these items with no thought or care. We follow the school board procedures that have been set for us.
Yeah. We use multiple resources to evaluate different texts as we're purchasing them as well. We don't just go on Amazon and start buying. We use Follett mostly. And we use Common Sense Media too to understand like age level requirements for text too before we purchase them. And sometimes things fall through and we identify those and then we make changes too, or we'll say this needs to be sent up to middle school. So when you're buying so many books too, we can't read, 1,000 books a year to keep up with it. So we do our best in that regard.
We just pause 1 second. Joe actually had a question.
Okay.
And so he's on, we have to swap the audio over.
No problem.
Yeah, it was just a general question. First of all, I should give a shout out. My kids have had Mr. Kelly over at Wilson for a few years and they always like his stuff. So great to see you there. Just a general question. It was right about the time that Noah asked that question. I was just curious how much there was the point made about co-teaching and coaching other teachers in the district, presumably on some of the technology. Does that include getting involved with counselors and helping them to understand and articulate how some of those tools can lead kids down certain career paths?
I don't know if you want to answer that at the high school level, Jenny, but to a certain extent it does. It really depends on, the student and what they're looking for. A lot of times we get not roped into, but, we get asked those kind of, I have no clue about coding. Do you have any idea of what, school they might want to go to if they're interested in computer science or programming? So, I mean, that's a great question we can look into further too.
And I know I've helped students who come to me and ask me those questions. I've helped them do research into what would best fit what they're looking at, what they're looking for.
Yeah, and I know a lot of us do meet with our counselors as well because they have databases that they use and lessons they use for students to go through career choices. And they go through and they have to select. And some kids are like, I don't want this job, after all the personality traits and things. So we do collaborate with them a lot, but that could be an area we can grow in as well.
Cool. Thank you.
Question? All right, Joe, if you have another question, just raise your hand in the Zoom chat, okay? So I can see you. No, you're good? Okay. All right, go ahead, Amy.
Okay. I might have missed it. I'm not sure if this falls under this, but you were just talking about how, so we use the common school funds to improve library print collection resources. How often are we going into our libraries and pulling stuff out that's old? I went and shelved at Madison last week and just to volunteer, and I was like, whew. I mean, there's some good texts out there, but like some of it, and I know our innovation coaches are pretty stretched, but I'm just curious as to how are we able to evaluate what we really need in our libraries when so I guess if you could just give me a timeline of how often we look at libraries in the schools and are we, how we're pulling things and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we do an inventory every other year. So it is a requirement of all innovation coaches to do a library inventory every 2 years. We do recommend that they do it, split it. So do a fiction inventory 1 year and then a nonfiction the next. And as they're doing that, we do hope that they are weeding. We do provide weeding resources for all innovation coaches. Now, with that said, we have 2 certified librarians and we try to get all of that information out. Sometimes innovation coaches will meet with reading specialists to say, hey, these are some texts that I'm thinking about getting rid of. And a lot of people are like, the more books, the merrier, even if that book has not been checked out in 22 years, we still want it. But we do weed every 2 years.
And we do have software that through Follett that tells us the age of your collection. So it does make that weeding process a little easier, or how often it's been checked out. So you know specifically what to remove and the ages of outdated materials and things like that.
And it's hard.
Yeah, no, I'm not concerned so much about the age sometimes, because obviously we know, but there are some things that we know that have changed, over time, like, Pluto's not a planet and that kind of stuff, now.
How dare you?
Okay, I'm sorry, I said something controversial, but okay, anyways, but you know what I'm saying?
It might be again. We don't
Yeah.
know.
I don't know. So anyway, I'm just saying that
Making a
stuff like that.
comeback.
where,
As a fourth grade teacher.
But if you're, I just want to know how.
It's
just
healing.
that we're doing that. Okay. All right.
Yeah, as much as we can. And it's a very time consuming
Well,
process too.
believe me, it's
And-
just to shelve,
And it's also,
few
we're
books.
using common school funds to purchase these books. So we
Yeah.
want this book to last as long as they possibly can. And if it's in good shape, we want to keep it there,
Okay.
but also we don't want a book that's taking up space. So that's the challenge of the job too.
All right, the next sliver of the pie is the community partnerships, where we would cultivate partnerships within the school and the local community, families, caregivers, nonprofit organizations, government agencies, higher education libraries, businesses, and things like that. We use a Wills subscription to be able to purchase things. We connect, like Brendan said, with the PTA and Beanstack. Have author visits, things like that, books fairs, a district administrators on board of the West Dallas Public Library as well. So our goal or area of growth for the community partnership is to develop that partnership with the West Dallas Public Library. And our growth plan includes just creating a plan and implementing it over the course of the year and making possible partnerships with them.
All right, the next one, data and privacy, not too much in this area, as this kind of falls a lot under the tech department, but this is how we support it too. So we want to teach and promote student data and privacy through our instruction and the role as an educational leader. So we do a lot with this, especially in elementary and intermediate digital citizenship lessons. So we do have a digital citizenship curriculum that we do teach in elementary. So students are understanding of, not to share things online. Also, we teach the COPA law, which is anyone under 13, you can't share any private information on or can't, collect a profile on. So we try to inform all students of that. They can't have Facebook or Instagram before they're 13. It's technically not legal for them to do that. And so we do a lot with this already. Also, an area that we wanted to improve on is just making sure that teachers are aware of this too. So teachers aren't trying to sign up. They're always asking, can we sign up for this app? Well, does it collect data? Do they have a privacy policy? So we just want to do a better job of communicating that out to teachers as well. So create a process or procedure for monitoring various apps in the district logins to make sure they have a privacy policy. So that's kind of our goal there, just making sure we're doing a better job of it. Any questions there? I'll just keep going. All right. I think we have 2 slivers left. We're so close. All right. Collaborative leadership leads beyond the library, participates in setting the school district's vision and strategic plan for digital learning, and fosters a culture of collaboration and innovation to empower teachers and learners. We have technology ICANN statements for elementary, and we're working on that GVC as well. Facilitate professional development. We do that a lot. CISA1 Library Media Network, which is what we're partnered with. DPI School Library Planning Group as well. We also seek out different additional certifications to help move our library programs forward too. And this is like becoming Apple teachers or Google certified trainers, things like that, above and beyond, so that we can help those students get those skills. So areas of growth, participate more with building district professional learning communities and other district committees. So our growth plan for that is our goal, collaborate during planning time with core teachers. So making that more across the board, making sure that innovation coaches are doing the core teacher planning as part of it. And we're going to figure out a way that we can share that out and keep track of it more. Last one. All right, use of space and time. Provide flexible spaces that promote inquiry, creativity, collaboration, community. This is the one we've really been trying to focus on the last few years, and the development of a lot of maker spaces and areas where students can use these hands-on tools and be creative with their learning. It really supports the PBL in the classrooms and our deeper learning competencies. So we have focused on maker spaces and student creativity and exploration. Things like the Spheros I mentioned earlier, having green screen areas, having recording studios where students can come in, have a quiet space to record. Just a lot of different things that we're trying to work on there. Designated library times for lessons, that's elementary. Change displays and highlight new topics to promote curiosity. So constantly having them come in and wonder about things and seeing the new books that are there. Display student work in libraries too. It's a community space. We want it to be a community space. We want student artwork there. We want kids in that space. And also having shared calendars for signing up of library spaces. So outside of library time, if you're not checking out books, that space should be used as community space. So having that, we do that as well. Areas for growth spaces are designed to meet the needs of diverse learners. That's where we want to kind of focus on this goal. And we're doing that already, but we can do more at all schools. Maintain a space that is conductive to learning and making. So we want to just emphasize that and continue on the path of that curiosity and creativity. All right, so those are our goals. We have 14 goals total. We're really excited to dive into them. And if you have any questions, let us know. Sorry, that was really long.
First of all, that's not even close to a long presentation.
Believe me.
Stay for 10 minutes.
Any questions or comments? Brendan?
So this is huge, all of this that's going on, and there's a lot there. And so you mentioned that you're doing some training, you're doing some co-teaching with the teachers. With how big all of this is, are we also doing the teaching of the remedial things to teachers? Because even in the business that I'm, that is 100% digital, I'm still having to teach my colleagues how to use Excel. And it's like, well, we should know this, but sometimes we jump over the basics in order to get to the other pieces. And so is there a consistent way that we're bringing, especially the teachers that are further along in their career, that haven't had the technology the entire time, up to speed and being able to get them comfortable? Because then that would also go along with the question that was asked earlier. Are we using the pieces that we have? Because there might be a fear of the technology itself. And so then the stuff isn't getting used as well as it could be, because we're not necessarily supporting, I guess for better word, our technophobes that are out there, and bringing them so that they feel comfortable with just doing the basics, so then they can see the benefits of using these other pieces of technology.
Definitely, I mean, it's a great question. We don't have anything like highlighting every single thing that we do. And it's going to be different for every teacher, right? You know, and some teachers that you work with every single time on the same thing. But that's really why we're pushing that coaching piece. It's because we want to be there with them for the process. You know, in the past, when we've done a lot of this, it's like, oh, you can teach that. Okay, I'm gonna go make my copies, you know, and you can teach that, and the kids will know it when I get back. But what we're really trying to do is that coaching piece of this is where you need to do and put that ownership on the teachers to implement that. Like, we're hoping they don't need us and we can move on to the next innovative thing too. But it's constantly meeting with them too. And like, we have new teachers in our building that we're constantly meeting with that are afraid, you know, we have all devices for every kid. I didn't have that before. So just supporting them that way. But there's nothing that is written that says we need to do this. We just have a checklist, not a checklist, but you know, we want to check in. We check in with all teachers. Something to look into. Yeah.
And one more to that, we also try to always make sure there's when the teacher showcases or the open doors, when teachers are just showing off something they're doing, that's teacher to teacher. Lots of times those are around some of these tools or some of the things that they're using to make and create. So it's this super informal way to see, hey, here's how I figured out how to use this. And even this year, we had a really successful sharing out from one of our innovation coaches who was brand new to us this year, who chose to throw himself out there and present to some colleagues around, from Irving, Tyler, He did a great job at just like taking that kind of fear down with it, right? Because as soon as you see somebody else using it, you're like, well, that doesn't look that hard. Okay, I could probably figure that out.
No.
No,
No,
that's not always the case.
no, they're gonna be like, oh, that looks really cool. I wish I could do that.
Yeah.
And then they're gonna see how much time it takes to do it. And they'll be like,
Yes.
I have to do something else.
Yes.
So if there could be like some more consistent, smaller chunks of training that would help bring them along.
Yeah.
And I think even for that, because I went through the PDs and it's like, oh, hey, look at all this great stuff. And it's like, yeah, that's really great. I'm pretty good with technology. And then I left and I was like, I'm never using any of that.
I know, right?
So
Well, and one of the things that we did identify, which goes along with the question, is that survey to staff too. Like
Mhm.
if we did that, even twice a year, we're going to understand that they do not feel comfortable with this. They might have sat through that training and are like, what was that? And then we can identify that maybe we need to partner with them too and just open those communications. But we also do multi-tier ways of bringing it in. Like in elementary too, all of the tools that we purchase with Common School Funds, we're also supposed to be teaching lessons and supporting it in the classroom. Part of buying it with Common School Funds means you're using it for your library plan and you have a person that is there to teach it. So we're partnering with teachers to bring it in, but I'm also in my classes in elementary teaching discovery education. And I can't tell you how many times that a teacher's like, oh, well, we got to find this information. Oh, let's just use Discovery Ed. Oh yeah, we have that. It's like that, where it's not always in their mind, but the students are also helping with that just by learning individually too. And they can bring some of those skills to the teacher. So along with us.
And then the
Your
other
son's
thing
that way too.
Thanks.
that we've added as well is some of that training for support staff, right? Because sometimes people forget that our educational assistants are in classrooms supporting students on all these devices and all these pieces. But for a long time, they were getting no training in how to use any of that. Well, it's really hard to support the student when you don't know how to use it yourself. So we've made some, I'll call it inroads there. There's still a work in progress with getting everyone kind of up to speed, but at least for our secretaries and our other support staff as well, like there has to be a place for them. They support the students throughout the day, or they're trying to communicate with the parents and whatever app we're currently using or whatever other form of communication is. So it's important that they get the training as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. One more last thing. I'm sorry, I just talk all the time. But with that, when I said about the surveys too, one of the things that we were talking about is that we'd like to have those videos on demand too. So you can watch it at night, or whenever you feel comfortable watching. Not that you have to watch it, but if you don't feel comfortable doing it in person or don't want to admit that you don't know what it is, you can just watch this. So having more of that available. During COVID, we did create, the Innovation Coaches created a website for teachers to support with tools so they knew how to like record their screens, to interact with Zoom, all of those things. Like we had a lot of views on those, why not? Why don't we do more? So, and just have it available and then share that out. So.
Thank you.
Other questions? Joe, any questions from your end? Joe's good. All right, so if we have no other questions, then I would look for a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Right, that passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Good luck. It's a lot.
A lot of stuff, yes. All right, so move on to item 11.3. Seek position on CISA #1 Board of Control, which is a 3-year term. Dr. Lexman.
So this comes around every few years. And so you can think of the Board of Control for CISA as kind of the school board for a school district, right? And so then various districts, the board here would need to take action to seek a position. And then there's a process at CISA that goes through to actually elect the Board of Control. And so I think pretty consistently, our board here has always approved this item when it comes up to seek a position. I mean, it gives one of you then, yet another meeting to go to each month. But to have voice at CISA 1, the CISA 1 is getting a new executive director this coming year. So Mary Gavigan is retiring again, I believe. And it's an internal promotion. So somebody that's very familiar with CISA 1 is coming into the role. So our recommendation is that the board would approve it and then we go through the process.
Any questions? Jane is our current CISA rep right now, correct? So we will be basically electing another one or asking another one full disclosure, in the past, usually the person who did it from the previous year, if they want to continue doing it, usually give them that opportunity. If someone wants to fight Jane for it, then we can certainly do that as well.
Be a dance off.
So basically, whoever would be
And
that
Pluto.
CISA rep for the next year, if we approve this and they were elected, they would be our representative, they would be on the board of control then at that point. So any questions? No questions, I'd look for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
We all paused and waited.
It's moved and seconded. Any last minute questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that passes. That is the last item we have for action this evening. Before we move on to our workshop, I move for a 5-minute recess.
Second.
All right, we are at recess. Their microphone.
Perfect time break.
All right. All right, well, welcome. We have our part one workshop, financial stability and efficiency, school consolidation. We have a team of experts here to walk us through everything. And we also have two board members who are also on the committee that can help us understand. So without further ado, please take it away.
So I'm just going to give a little context. This is our first of a two-part workshop. We thought it was very important that we make sure that our whole board understands all of the details and information provided. Is this on?
Doesn't sound like.
It's very quiet.
Yeah, I'll speak louder. So this is our first of a two-part workshop. We wanted to make sure that all of our board and our community understood all of the information that's necessary and important to make such very important decisions for our community. So in an effort to not overwhelm, we're splitting this up into two parts. So this first part we'll walk through is kind of a recap of where we've been, and then we'll make two recommendations, one for an intermediate school consolidation and one for an elementary school consolidation by the end of this workshop, and we'll have discussion within each part of that. So if someone could just hit next, I'm just going to start with the roadmap that we'll take today, and this also includes where we've been. So these items will look.
I'm sorry, before you start,
Go
do
ahead.
you want us to hold questions until certain points in the presentation?
You can just ask them throughout, and if we're going to address it soon, we'll just note that.
Okay.
So just a recap of where we've been and then where we're going to be tonight. So this is a little roadmap, and you'll see this throughout our presentation tonight. We're kind of going to zoom in on each one of these points and then come back out to this roadmap. So the first thing that we've done over a number of years is identify our need. And again, none of the stuff that we're talking through tonight is new. These are all concepts that we've been working through for a number of years. So we identified our need. We need a right size. We have more space than we need within our facilities, which we know is not an efficient way to run buildings and operations. So we have more space than we need and a need to right size, which then led to a number of steps that we've taken over the last few years, including enrollment projections and a long-range facilities master plan that took place from February 2020 to February 2021, an entire year of work that went into that with studies from our architects and our construction management firm that we partnered with. Our next step on the map then was our facility advisory community team, or FACT, as we refer to them. So that was a 6-month time period there from January 2021 to June 2021, where we worked with our FACT team to identify recommendations for our board and next steps. Most recently, we've been working as a school consolidation committee, which is basically leading us to the recommendations that you'll see tonight. So just kind of a recap of where we've been. This is not a result of the referendum in any sort of way. This has kind of been happening in parallel and was part of the steps throughout our plan, and one of the steps that came forward with FACT. So Steve will kind of take us into the nuts and bolts throughout each of these steps, and then we'll talk through the recommendations tonight.
Okay, thank you. So the first step, as Mrs. Windler said, is identify our needs. And the main need is right sizing. And so the goal was to create efficiencies within our operations and finances and make recommendations regarding the following. And these two were kind of our overall and our overarching themes, and that's how many schools do we need and where should they be? And then what facilities remain as is and what facilities need renovation, replacement, or consolidation. Then we started out with, we need to start out with where we're at to know what changes we need to make. And so we started out with, we have the 11 elementary schools, 3 intermediate, 2 comprehensive high school, 1 project-based learning high school, 6 supplemental buildings. And the important part too of this is that the average age of our buildings is over 76 years old. So the second step on this tour, if you will, was the enrollment projections. And so we hired Roffers to do an independent study, and these are the major areas that they looked at. They looked at demographic, they looked at housing changes, they went through and they looked at what the enrollment projections are estimated to be based on all of that information. They looked at birth rates through the year 2035. And then one of the main reasons for doing this as well was, again, we know what we have for capacity. We know our enrollment's gone down, but then looking at, right now we have so much capacity. How much capacity do we need right now and then in the foreseeable future? So here's a link for the Roffer study, if somebody wants to go back and look at that. And there are three of the main points. One is that they project a decrease of about 283 resident students by 2035. And enrollment will continue to decline, but it'll be slower than what it has been. And then the next slide, which is this one, shows kind of a depiction of since 2014, what enrollment was. And at the time of the study, the red line indicates where we were. And then it shows it going out to 2030, where it's projected that we'll have 7,060 students. So next, as Mrs. Windler said, we looked at creating a long-range facilities master plan because we know what our current configuration is. We know what enrollment has been and what we're projecting it to be. So the next logical step then was to look at all of our facilities and in what shape are they in. So these were the main goals for the long-range facilities master plan, to identify and document current facility conditions and deficiencies, maximize efficiency in facilities utilization across the district. And by that, we mean physical capacity versus utilization. And then, recommend options for relocation of the district administrative offices was also something that we were looking at. Because the current lease for the building that we're in currently began on March 29th of 2019, and it expires on March 31st or terminates on March 31st of 2024. So then again, a kind of an overview of the facilities is one is that many of the buildings within the district, as most of you have heard before, they're outdated. And a lot of the infrastructure is just starting to wear out. I mean, it's old. It's to the point where we've talked about before where if a certain component of a system breaks down, in a lot of cases, we'll go and try to find that part, and we can't because the manufacturer stopped making it 10 or 15 years ago. So then we have to replace the entire system, which not only costs more, but it also takes longer to get the whole system as opposed to a part. And as the architects had pointed out too, is that this isn't due to lack of maintenance. It's just that the systems and the infrastructure is old, and it's just, a lot of them are just wearing out. So the capital improvement plan, and on the right of this slide, there's a facility study document link here. So you can go and you can look at that. The whole document was a little over 600 pages long, and it looked at all the systems of every single building and supplemental building in detail. And then you can see on the left-hand side, it says what was included in that report. And then more importantly, I think as well, is what was not included in that report. And then this, a lot of you have probably seen this before. It's that the overall capital improvement project needs for the district, and it totals almost $248 million. And again, I think it's important to point out that what this would be to upgrade the electrical, the plumbing, the mechanical systems. It wouldn't do anything to get us up to 21st century classrooms. This would just be like the roofing, the exterior of the buildings. A lot of the things that nobody really can see other than, the people that work in this all the time.
Steve?
Yes.
I have, 2 questions on this slide. First, these are in 2021 dollars?
Yes.
Correct? Would it be conceivable that with inflation and everything that these figures, because I presume it includes labor and all that sort of stuff to do this work, they might actually be more now?
Yes, the number in talking with Bray and also with CG Schmidt, and that's our architects and our construction management company, they're saying their recommendation would be if we wanted to update these numbers to do it by 8%.
8% increase?
Yes.
Okay.
Because the CPI may be one number, but construction costs due for a lot of other reasons has gone up at a higher rate or faster rate than what the CPI has.
Okay. The other question I have is about there's a recreation department cost in here. And do we know what that was? Obviously, the rec building was just redone recently, and I know they're getting a garage. Do we know what that amount was? Was that something that was not done in the recent renovation?
Yeah, they didn't do a complete overhaul of the existing building there, so that would be to do that.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
And the other point that I had made, I think previously when this report was made out, is that $248 million is definitely a lot of money. And each year annually in the budget, the Fund 10 budget, I get 1.2 million for capital improvement projects, which, I'm very grateful for. And I think our department's done a great job of making that go as far as we can each year. But the main question then is, how many times does 1.2 million go into 248 million? Because, with funding like that, that's how long it would take. And so, people question, well, why, can't we just do this with a regular budget? That's the main reason, is that, there's just no mechanism built into school funding in Wisconsin to be able to do that. So the next step brought us to FACT, which is the Facilities Advisory Community Team. And then here they worked within two main questions, and that was how many schools can be renovated and/or replaced and/or consolidated in ways that inspire and shape learning for the future, and how can we do this in ways that are cost effective to our community. And these two questions were at the beginning of our presentation every single time that we had a FACT meeting, so that we, they stayed fresh in everybody's mind and we didn't lose sight of that. Then this is the committee members that were on there, and you can see that there are parents, there were teachers, there were citizens, there were students that were on there as well. And then this shows the district team that was on the committee as well. Another report that was done was an existing building capacity study. And Bray Architects, in conjunction with C.G. Schmidt, worked on 3 different methodologies and came up with 3 different sets of capacity. The methodology that we ended up choosing was methodology 2, because that more closely reflects what we're actually doing in terms of classroom utilization at the current time.
Steve?
Yeah.
I had a question
Sorry.
about this one too. Actually, you can go to the next slide. I'm sorry. Were you going to say something on this slide? Because this is where actually I have my question.
Yeah, but go ahead.
So with the methodologies that were laid out, it seems to me that you'd be able to fit fewer students with methodology number 3 when you're taking into account social distancing. But in a lot of instances, it shows that you can fit more students in a building when you do the social distancing plan. Is this because of unused spaces then being used in those buildings?
Yes, because what we did is we looked at if you had an art room and maybe it was only used a couple of days out of the week, then you would, during other days of the week, then you could use that for classroom instruction. That you could look at if you wanted to, if the gym wasn't being used the entire time, that you could use that as well.
Okay.
So just using, making the most of the space that was available.
Thank you. All right, just want to double check on that. Thank you.
And I know that this slide is a little difficult to read, but methodology 2 shows that district-wide, we have a capacity of 8,915 students. And at the time this study was done, we had approximately 7440 in terms of students. So that's approximately 1,500 excess capacity in terms of students district-wide. And then one of the things that FACT looked at was, how do we look at all of this information, and what's the easiest way to be able to look at it consistently, given all of the different options? So one of the things we came up with was long-range pathways. And so this is an example of what a long-range pathway looked like, kind of the template of what it was. And this particular one on this slide shows what our current configuration is. It shows the 11 elementary schools, shows the 3 intermediate schools, shows the 2 comprehensive high schools, and then the 1 project-based high school. And some of the things that we looked at as well, or we discussed, was, given where we are at and going into the future, we looked at, do we want to look at doing different grade configurations? Do we want to look at K4? Do we want to look at 5, 6, and 7, 8, 9? We just looked at all different kinds of configurations. And so we created a pathway for each of those options. And so as we went further into this and we discussed more, 4 of the pathways were rejected. And some of those included, separate 5th and 6th grades, having separate, intermediate and high school buildings with different grade configurations. And along the way, some of those were eliminated. So we started out with, I believe there were 13 different pathways, and we rejected 4 of them, and then we had 9 pathways that remained. And again, that was still too many pathways to be able to really look at and dive into. So what we did is we just went through the process again with each of those and said, okay, well, what do we like about this one? What do we not like? And then through the process of elimination, we got down to where there were 2 pathways that were identified. And here you can see those were 1A and 1B. And the only difference between both of these pathways, they both show 8 elementary schools. They both show 2 intermediate schools, but the one on the right, 1A, shows 3 high schools, and the one on the left, the one on the left shows 3 high schools. The one on the right shows 2 high schools, 1 comprehensive high school and 1 project-based learning high school. Then one of the things that the architects went through is they did an analysis of the school sites, and they looked at all of the school sites, and they went through and they looked at these 7 different aspects at each of the sites, and they gave it a plus if it was a positive for that school, a minus if it was a negative for that school, and then if there is nothing there, it was neutral. So basically what they did is they looked at the high end, the low end, and then what was in the middle. And then the yellow, green, and red, the red shows that that's a more difficult site, given those 7 aspects. Yellow means that it's neutral, and then green means that it's on the positive side for the majority of those areas that were looked at. So what does that mean? So then we put it in a district map. We took the same colors from the previous slide and just plotted it on the map of where all the greens were, the yellow, and the reds. Then after all of this, and like Mrs. Windler said, it was a 6-month process. I think at one point I remember seeing it was over 800 hours that we spent discussing all of this. We came up with 3 recommendations, and then also a recommendation on what we wanted to do next. And the big one here was the second bullet point, which was reduce the number of school facilities across our district to align with enrollment projections, increase operational efficiencies, reduce long-term administrative and maintenance costs. And that would include operating 8 elementary schools, 2 intermediate schools, 1 comprehensive high school, and 1 smaller project-based learning high school. So then that got us to the school consolidation committee. And the goal there was to determine which schools would be consolidated based on fact, recommendations, and considerations. And so some of the recommendations, questions, or next steps was identify 1 intermediate school for consolidation, and then what would the timing of that be, and then what would the transition plan look like, and then identification of 3 elementary schools for consolidation, and again, what would the timing of that be, and what would the transition plan look like. So this is the initial meeting of this was in December 13th of 2021. And I forgot to add at the beginning, as Mrs. Windler said, this process started back in December of 2019. So this is a process that's been going on for a while. There's been a lot of work that's been going on, this entire time, and which has led us to this point. And then you can see the subsequent meetings for the committee and then the participants of the committee.
Can I just note in there that the reason why Jeff and I participate on this committee is we both sat on the FACT committee. So I just, more saying that I know the board knows that, but just for the general public to know, that's why Jeff and I sat on the committee, because we were involved in the process since last December or December 2020 when the FACT, or January 2021 when the FACT committee got together.
Yes, you already had all that foundational information. You'd been part of the discussions and so one of the things that we did then is we looked at all of the 11 elementary schools, and this time, instead of 7 different areas, we looked at 25 different areas. And so again, we followed the same format of the pluses and the minuses. Yes.
Where did you get the 25 categories from?
It was really a group effort. We worked with district administration. We worked with a couple of the board members. We worked with our architects. We worked with the construction management team. So there was a lot of input. It was really a team effort of, these are the things that we really think we should look at. Leadership and learning was involved in it as well. So it really was a group and a team effort.
It's really hard to read it, just to.
Yeah.
Heads up.
Yeah, the real one is blown up on 11 by 17.
We have it on board book too, if you want to go into.
I am on the board. book.
Here, I have a copy printed out.
You do?
Yeah, and
Our
I
fight
always
is over.
have copies in my office if you ever want to see it as well. Yeah, there's no easy way to do the 25 columns in the 11 sites. But we went through, like I said, and we did the same plus or minus, or if there's nothing there, then it's neutral as well. So then that brought us to, one of our first recommendation, and because we had looked at, like you said, the architects had looked at that one where they did the 7 analysis of the intermediate schools as well. And one of the things that we are looking at too is that we want to maintain our presence in all of the communities. So with the intermediate schools, that means that West Milwaukee needs to remain, which leaves us then with Frank Lloyd Wright and Lane. And between those two sites, the architect identified Lane as the more challenging site for a couple of reasons. One is because it's landlocked. There's really no way to expand out. The other is at the age of the building. The original building was built in 1921. So, this year, then it's 101 years old. And then also the CIP needs of the building. And so therefore it was, our recommendations that we move forward with the consolidation of Lane Intermediate School, beginning with the 23-24 school year. And then some of the questions, if that recommendation, when the board votes, if that is approved, then what we need to look at, as well as the transition plan. And then what do we do with the existing facility if that happens? Do we sell it? Do we lease it? Do we repurpose it? So those are some of the things that we'd have to look at as well.
So at this time, we'll pause and have a conversation and answer any questions that the board has regarding intermediate. And then the next few slides here would be regarding the elementary. So we'll talk now about the intermediates.
Did you do like a 25-point categorical on the 3 intermediate schools?
No.
We did not.
So it was just looked at from the point of view of expansion and cost.
Correct.
I just want to make sure, because I know
Yep.
we have families saying, well, why did we buy it a few years ago? Though most of us weren't on the board then. Why did we buy it? Then now we're going to sell it again. And I just want to make sure we have a valid, that we looked into, the validity of Lane. And
Yeah, it really comes down to the fact that we're committed to West Milwaukee because it's in West Milwaukee. And you start comparing FLW and Lane just doesn't make sense to keep.
Yeah.
Because FLW is it's a newer building, it's a better building, it needs windows.
for what it's worth, I agree. I just
Yeah,
wanted to make
but
sure.
the logic is
community
pretty
hears.
clear as you just step through it. When it was purchased, it was a time when open enrollment was wide open. And so there was enrollment growth and pressure. And that's been managed differently as the board has evolved. And so now with lower open enrollment or fewer open enrolled students and declining enrollment, right, it really starts to make the case.
And if I might add, because I was on the board when we purchased that, it was like somebody just said, get out of the building, we're having a fire drill, and they locked the doors because all the computers were still in the rooms, the telephones, the books were in the library. All the uniforms from their teams were still in the locker rooms. It was really, we got a good deal when you look at everything.
Sure.
And the other thing with FLW too is it has a lot more land
Yeah.
than what Lane does.
Other questions, Brendan?
If we're looking at this and we go down to 2, are we actually going to redraw the boundaries then and make sure that we actually evaluate, or are we just going to try and be like, well, a little here and a little there, just kind of stretch them?
Yeah, and that's part 2 of this. We'll be looking at, if we were to do this, kind of like what Dr. Lexman and Mrs. Windler said is we'll look at what ifs. Well, what if we do this and we put the boundary line here, or what if we do this? And so that's what we'll go into more detail at the next meeting.
But the simple answer is yes, this will mean new boundary lines.
Okay.
And the impact and whatever the board decides to do with the elementaries will influence where the boundary can or should go. But there are a group of current 4th graders that right now have a FLW pathway that will end up with a West Milwaukee pathway. Right? That's right? 'Cause there's a point at which there's gonna be impasse, and I just want you to start thinking about, that's the group.
And the pathways, to speak to that a bit, are they're challenging in terms of how you think about them. Because when you think about a pathway, it's elementary, intermediate, high school, right? So naturally, similar to how we do open enrollment, we start with high school. Where will this student end up if they go to Hoover, right? Well, Hoover goes to Hale. So you start with backwards and work your way this way. So when we start with, intermediates, you look at, if you close lane, then where would the boundary then move to accommodate not having FLW have 1,400 students? Well, you're going to move the boundary more west, right? Just naturally. So then you have to look at your current elementary pathways to try to craft out the plan to not disrupt so many elementary schools. So geographic location comes into play, trying not to cut elementary schools in half, which divides the
That was
schools,
my question.
right? There's just many different variables that go into that. So it's a delicate dance, but yes.
Other questions?
Can I just add a comment?
Sure.
Okay, I just want also people to just recognize that, just so you know, right now our West Milwaukee and Lane are currently about, what would you say, 2/3 full or even half full? So just to give kind of people an idea of how much space we actually have. So, I mean, we're not talking about cramming kids into a school. I mean, we've got the capacity to be able, to comfortably put our kids through this shift.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, because West Milwaukee is just over 300. I could hold 550. Next year, Connie and I were talking about, she's worried about, I think she only has 72 ninth graders coming in, and she cannot figure out how to schedule. When you're trying to run a traditional intermediate school schedule, with that number of kids, it gets really tight, what you can and can't do. Sixth graders, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
sorry.
confusing.
Did I say ninth graders?
Ninth
Yeah,
graders.
not sorry. It's like, oh, surprise, we moved ninth graders to reopen high school.
Yeah. When we're talking about that, when we're talking about West Milwaukee being at 2/3 or half full, like with the capacity, that's based on classroom sizes, correct?
It's yeah. So I guess how the architects develop a number, right? And then I look at in terms of the best predictor of what our schools can hold or what have they historically held. So West Milwaukee, as Dr. Lexman said, comfortably can hold 500 to 600 students as a range.
But for classrooms, like
Yeah.
I don't want us to be like,
Nope.
oh, we can hold 600 people, but we have an auditorium and a cafeteria.
And
No,
nope.
that's not.
And yeah, exactly. It's a great point to make because that's the difference between like the fire code and the optimal, right?
Right.
And that's an optimal number that's based on how many classrooms they have. That's not turning the study hall or the commons into a classroom. That's just how. How
With the
school
goal of
currently
keeping our
operates.
class sizes the same.
Yep. And so the optimal
Okay.
numbers that I use in our next Monday's workshop is based on the current averages that we look
Okay.
for when we staff the schools currently.
That's kind of an odd question, I guess. What is the 2020, 2023, 2024? Is that just so that we can get the transition piece into place, or like if we get boundaries redrawn, can we have kids want to get to where they're going to be anyways, start moving? If we already have a limited number of people at each of these buildings, why keep supporting it if that's a struggle for them to be able to do something?
It's possible to do that, to give, the incoming grades. So let's talk about just sixth graders, not ninth graders, sixth graders. That, right, if you make this decision fairly soon to start to figure out if there's some number of sixth graders that could then say, well, then let me go to my new neighborhood school and change now rather than 2 years from now. But we're already staffed for next year. That's the big but in there, right? So the staffing plan is built and built for the number of students we're anticipating in each building. So it may start to disrupt staffing if, a whole bunch of kids decide, well, then I won't go to FLW, I'll go to West. But we're gonna have some staffing things that we have to clean up. So that's the bit of the dilemma it creates at this stage in the year, because we're pretty locked in for the plan for September.
Yeah, that I would agree, Dr. Lexman, that is the challenge. So course requests, students start the course request process in January, all secondary schools. And so the course requests, we staff based on that. So if we have a brand new, part-time at one school, cinematography teacher, just an example that we had a Hale. In 1 year, students decided that they really wanted to take his class. So the next year, he went from being at Hale and Central to just full-time at Hale. And then we had more requests at Central the following year. So by using that approach, what ends up happening is the course request dictates staffing and sections. So if we were to, create a process for students to request to go, what might end up happening are students might have, there might not be enough sections offered at one school to accommodate that. And then we would be changing master schedules across all the high schools and intermediate schools, because given West Milwaukee's enrollment and Lane's enrollment, a lot of our elective areas get shared up with the high schools. So a business teacher might be shared with Lane and Hale. And if they now have to go to Frank Lloyd Wright, that'd be 3 travels. We'd be looking at likely hiring more staff to accommodate that. It'd be very challenging to do so.
So part of the reason that we're looking at this is financial. So we know what the CIP costs are at Lane. What is the estimate that would be saved if we consolidated Lane just in other costs? So it's not CIP, and not what it costs to renovate it, but what's the cost of not running it?
I don't have that with me tonight, but I will have that for next time.
Okay, so I think that number is important to know, the dollar figure. This would not be consolidating teaching staff. We would presume that staff would be distributed across the other 2. And is there a process in place for how that would work?
Not yet. So that conversation, oh yeah, Ann is still there, right? So Ann and I and then we had one conversation about that, about how staff will move. I don't want to get too far ahead of the board, but we're putting a little bit of energy into that, and a little bit of the initial conversation is first, where are the kids, right? How many? So what positions open? So it's the first thing we need to sort through. Then does a teacher that is in a school that's being consolidated, do they have the certification for the new position? So that's the first thing. Then what we talked about is teachers then have my first choice, second choice, third choice. And if there's 3 teachers with the same first choice, it would be the most senior teacher that would then get that choice. The one piece in this that we don't quite have the process worked out yet is this was Ann's idea, and I appreciate she brought it up. There's some very effective teacher teams. We do a lot of team teaching and co-planning and co-teaching. And if I were the principal on the receiving side, I'd want to grab an effective team and bring them over together. So that we still have to kind of sort through. And so we have 2 more meetings scheduled. We're going to get some of what I described here on paper so we can really think through the detail of it. But that's at least our initial conversation. Did I get it right?
So I mean, that's just an important part of it. It's not just families that's affected by it, with the teaching staff and other staff as well. So I guess depending how this goes this evening, whatever would come forward, we'd want to have those details figured out, staffing, exactly what would be lost, and that would be included in the cost savings, I presume. And then whatever the plan would be for staff moving forward, for how they would kind of be able to pick where they're going to go, how would they be assigned, how it would work out.
I just pulled the sheet up while you guys were talking. So the intermediate, in terms of closing Lane, in terms of annual savings, which is purely administrative staff, some operational pieces on Steve's end, and then I know Steve added in here utilities, things like that, and then added costs of transportation. It's considering elementary moves potentially. It's about just under $1 million to be a year.
That's net of transportation costs?
Yeah, it would be like inclusive of added expenses and then decreased.
Okay,
You know what
so
I
$1
mean?
million, we had $1 million a year essentially, we'd say,
Yeah.
roughly.
Yep.
Good to know. Right.
So another piece to that, and I don't know that we have the answers to this yet, is, if we move forward with consolidating Lane, what happens to that building and that land? Do we have any ideas of what that might look like or what the value is if it were to be resold or any of that? Because I know that's going to be a piece that especially the community is going to be very concerned about, like, especially when we just had a referendum, like what can we get and put back into some of our other needs?
And so Steve has been working with a broker. We want to be a little bit careful about those conversations. And I think it's one we would probably schedule in closed session to share the broker information, because it would be kind of tipping your hand in a contract negotiation potentially if you do it in public.
Sure.
And that is appropriate for a closed session. But there's some value. But used schools, they're not hot in the market like right now, like, trying to buy a house. So I think, right, as you work through it, I think people will be just surprised at the limited value of a used school. The other idea with Lane, Shelley and Recreation has expressed some interest in potentially a second recreation center someday. Having one on the west side could be kind of interesting as well. And keep the new gym and the newest part of the building and tear down the rest, and you have green space or a field. So there's some interesting opportunities for it, but the more detail of that we'll do at some point here in a closed session.
Okay, thank you. Kristen?
Is there going to be any, I haven't looked through, like, I'm not looking through the rest of this right now because I did over the weekend. I can't remember if it's posted or not, but is there talk about closing some of our supplementary buildings?
There has not been at this point.
The one that we'll talk through is the 1205 building. the
Yeah.
one that we're in right now. That's one we'll talk through at the end of next Monday's workshop, but we haven't discussed or gone into detail on the other supplementary buildings yet.
Okay.
Other questions on, just looking at Lane right now, intermediate. Joe, any questions? No? Brendan?
Are there actually any benefits to keeping Lane open? Are there pros to it?
Good question.
Not changing anything, I think be the one pro, but.
Right, not having to go through all the change work and the displacement.
Education changes inevitable.
But I think that on the education side, there's only benefit with being more efficient and being offer more courses and fewer traveling teachers. I think those are all benefits by consolidating. Keeping it a convenience for parents that live in the neighborhood, I think would be something, as a benefit if you keep it. But I can't think of many, that's for sure.
What's the 9333 building used for?
That's the wellness center and
Oh, okay.
storage,
I just wanted to
and
double check.
then Steve's
The-
teams operate out of there.
The maintenance staff is there, the
Okay.
IT department is there. Not only are our trucks and our vehicles stored there, but we also have a woodworking shop, an electrical shop.
Okay.
And that's where we do a lot of our in-house work is there.
Social media has asked what we do, and I want to make sure that it is a very necessary building.
It's very used, yeah.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of money moving our servers there when we sold this building, so we could move, because we used to occupy more floors.
Okay.
So all our IT servers are over there and it wasn't cheap.
What-
So,
Go ahead, sorry.
I'm sorry.
I was gonna say one other thing to note is that something that I think it's something that most people don't know, but all of Lane due to designated hazard is all bust. So if you hypothetically, right, wanted to keep Lane open and potentially close another intermediate school, it would nearly almost double our transportation costs as a district. Because you'd be busing all of Franklin, right, which is about 700 students.
Yeah.
So
Because you've got Greenfield Avenue and
50
Highland.
students a bus divided by 750, that's a lot of buses.
I mean, I live on 105th, so my child currently could bus across the street if he wanted
Yeah.
to. So it does seem, I mean, I know it's a federal law, but
Yeah.
it's kind of frustrating because he walks usually, but I get the safety part, but still. Right.
And we don't, and we don't currently pay for that many buses because we do ridership rates. And so we we pay for the number of buses that we know we'll need historically. And that was how we do it. But it's a whole other element to consider just in terms of this discussion. So.
Other questions about this piece? So this is no action that we have here, but we generally need to get an idea of where the board in general is leaning towards this. So we, in general, in favor, if the district would recommend that the consolidation of lane in 23-24 of that happening, or do we have other questions or things that we want to know before we made that decision, or where are we? Kind of a thumbs up, thumbs down situation on this proposal.
Thumbs up for consolidating, thumbs down.
Thumbs up for consolidating, for the recommendation, which is consolidating lane.
Yeah.
Helps. Joe? Okay, I can see it. All right, so.
Yeah, getting closer to a decision means we'll put more work into some of the detailed transition plans and some of those kind of things, but I don't want to start spending all their kind of time unless, we know there's something real in front of us that's going to have to be responded to.
Right, and it's important also that the community understands that this is seriously where the district is seemingly heading. And so then if there's other concerns that community members want to bring up between now and when we would take action on this, that allows opportunity for that to be done as well. So any other questions? Otherwise, we'll continue on with the workshop. Joe, you good? All right, good. Please continue.
Thank you. So then it gets us to the recommendation for elementary. And what we did then is we had all 11 of the buildings, and then we went through, looked at the plus and minus, added those together and came up with an aggregate score for each of them. And one that stood out as exceedingly challenging to maintain was Longfellow. Again, not unlike Lane, it's landlocked. It's also not an accessible building. And by that, I mean, it has multiple levels, but there's no elevator. And then it's the lowest ranked elementary through the facility criteria of those 25 criteria. It had a net score of a -17. And the next closest buildings were a -10 and a -9. And so then, looking at that, we looked at the 5 lowest ranked elementary schools. And that, as you can see from this, are Franklin, Jefferson, Longfellow, Madison, and Wilson. And if you look at Longfellow, you can see that it's predominantly negatives or minuses all the way across. There's a few pluses, but like I said, the net of that is a -17. And so therefore, the recommendations that we move forward with the consolidation of Longfellow Elementary School, beginning with the 23-24 school year. And again, the same questions that would need to be asked and answered are, what would the transition plan look like? And then do we sell, lease, or repurpose it? And then also a consolidation of 2 additional elementary schools with a possibility of one being in the 24-25 school year, and then the third one being in the 25-26 school year.
Why? Right off of that, why waiting?
So the reason to wait is just our own administrative and leadership capacity to manage this level of change. It is both physically very disruptive. So, for all those kids and teachers, there's a lot of stuff that has to get moved. And then there's the support side of helping teachers that, are now part of a different community. There's all of those parts and pieces that are going to require attention and time and staff, and to do 4 at once, we won't do it well. And we want to have the best opportunity to try to do these kind of changes as well as we can. So that's why we thought, stepping through this, and we'll learn from the first 2 as well. So if there are things that we can improve along the way, it gives us the opportunity to do that.
Kristen's hand was up first. Sorry, Brian.
That's fine.
Yeah, I didn't. Sorry.
I'm just wondering about Horace Mann had quite a few negatives, but also I know the net ends up being like just -1, but has a very high CIP cost. I'm just wondering if that was not factored in.
It was. We looked at all of those. We looked at CIP costs. We looked at the cost of, like, if we were to, because one of the things that the architects did as well is they came up with a construction cost of if we were to build a new school to replace the existing school. So we looked at that as well.
I'm wondering if we could share those numbers with the board, Steve, the one that has like.
Yeah, we'll have all of that next time.
Okay,
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, because we'll have the new construction cost as a percentage of, the cost, the CIP cost. We'll have all of those numbers for next time.
Yeah, because what we're doing this evening is just kind of rebuilding all the background knowledge and really focusing on what we think are the two obvious schools to consolidate.
Sure, but these categorical stuff is new to us.
Right.
You know, we've seen the CIP numbers
Mhm.
many times now. So I'm just trying to validate for some people who are watching also what certain schools over others based on what their capital needs are versus just looking at some other factors.
There'll be, and that, right, that level of detail will be next week, because otherwise, you're gonna sit here for another 2 hours.
Why not?
Why not? But the other dynamic that you'll see next week is, and I'll use Jefferson as an example, or you can use Man as an example. So if the board has consensus around Longfellow, those students have to go somewhere. So if you move them all to Jefferson, Jefferson comes off the table, right? Because you're not going to move them and then close that school again 2 years later, right? So that's the if then part of this. And then, oh no, now we're keeping Jefferson. So what does that mean for another school, right? So that's what Aaron has really been working on. If you do this, then this, or you could do this, then that. And that'll take some time to get through next week.
So that kind of, I might have, sorry.
It's me.
No. That, Marty, you kind of got into some of my concerns. I don't want to see a situation where we're closing a second and a third school and a family that moved to one school is now getting moved to another school. But I'll take that a step further. I want to make sure we have a good plan for our teachers as well. I don't want to see them shuffling potentially every year either. I want to make sure that when we're looking at all this, our students and our teachers know that they have a home for the next few years. So I want to make sure that we're kind of looking at that holistically.
Yes, yep. All of that is kind of factored in, trying to find a plan that impacts the fewest number of students is a big part of it. So in terms of disruptions and how many disruptions they may experience as a result of which schools get consolidated. So that's all kind of worked into what you'll see.
Just wanted to say, I don't think some of you guys realize the work that those three people over there did. It was incredible, the amount of information we were given. I would be really surprised if there's some situation that one of the three of them hadn't looked into and had it. It was never, well, let me check on that, I'll get back to you. I think Aaron can give you the numbers of classes in every building in the district off the top of his head. It's just, it was just being part of the committee was truly eye-opening at what they were able to provide for us. So along with that, I would like to thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Jane.
Marty, so you toggle between 8 or 9 grade schools, depending on when you're talking. And I know that originally we had said that it was a pathway, if we have 1 high school and 2 intermediates, and then it would 8, right? So I guess my question would be, how much of a savings would it be to have 8 as opposed to 9? Because I'm small grade schools are better than larger grade schools in my mind. So if it's not going to be that much of a savings and we're not going to have to move. So I'm not sure that I care if we have 9 funneling into 2 intermediates or 8, so I would like to know the difference between 8 and 9, and that, because again, more disruption, and so that one. And then we originally said that we wanted to go to 1 high school, 1 conventional high school. And then the referendum didn't pass. So if we're now switching and thinking about the intermediates and we're thinking about the elementaries, how far down the road are we thinking about the high schools? Because once again, my 8 or 9 would make a difference.
Aaron.
I can talk to the first
Okay.
question. Dr.
Right,
Lawson?
well, the cost piece of it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead with that.
So I guess to best answer your question, in terms of if every school was the same, right? we kind of evaluated elementary because the core values of what the savings are holistically the same. One principal, one custodian, it's like things like that, right? So it's about 400,000 a building because the teachers, regardless of the size, are gonna travel with the students, right? So, but to answer your question more specifically, if you close a school that, receives no busing and now they're all bused, now 400,000 might become 100,000. I mean, that might be extreme, but you get my point. So it depends on the school, and that's kind of that's the best way I can answer your question.
So I think also to expand on that, next week, we're going to put on our thinking caps and go really hard into the data. Deep dive in all of your questions on the cost per school and the busing costs and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you'll have a packet next week. It'll be linked to, after meeting for the public to see as well. So all of these questions are really great. Thank you for bringing them up. And we'll talk through all of these really deep details next week. We started, like Dr. Lexman said, with sort of the ones that were, I'm going to use the word easy, but nothing about this is easy. The ones that are just a little bit more obvious to identify in terms of consolidating one elementary and one intermediate, which allows us to work through fewer if-then scenarios next week, because each one we go down is a whole avenue of this and that and that and that. So we're limiting right now our if-then scenarios for next week so that we can get into those deeper dives and really identify the information that we need to make the best decision for long-term too. So we talked about, I think it was Brian that just said, we don't want to do this and then do it again. That was one of the things that we factored in. So next week we'll talk about, okay, well, we could do this as one of our if-thens. We can do this, but then in a few years, we're going to be doing this and we don't want to be doing that. That means closing another one in 5 years. So if we want that off the table, we're thinking long-term about how our decisions are going to affect our families, not just in 5 years, but in 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
For the high school question. So my kind of thinking is that as we work through the intermediate, the elementary decisions, we get these plans in place, then that consolidation committee may reconvene to start talking about high school. And I think that's probably 6 years out, where you could potentially fit all of the students in Hale.
Okay, that was what I used here.
Yeah, the enrollment at this time, it would be, I would say the word impossible to do without some sort of major facility project by Steve to do something like that now, high school.
Because we had looked at that and we estimated somewhere between 5 and 8 years.
Okay.
And the decision that we will make as a board to determine if we're going to do 3 or 2 elementary schools is really going to come next week. We will get all the information and look at all the pluses and all the minuses and what schools are involved. And based off of that information, we'll get a feeling from the board. Do you think you want to do 2 or do you think you want to do 3? Because that is really what's going to determine some of those decisions based off of that. So there's obviously dollars and cents involved in this, but there's people cost as well. And so all of that will be taken into account. But right now, what we're really looking at is if as a board, based with the information that we have here, because we're not looking at 2 or 3, we're looking at 1 right now. If one of those elementary schools that we would consolidate would be Longfellow based on the information we have. So do we have more questions about that particular scenario? Brendan?
I think it's about the particular scenario. So yes.
Okay.
If we're closing one now and looking further down, then again with the boundaries, how does it? Because we close this one now and we have all that, and it's essentially the same question that Brian's asking is how do we not have people then shuffled again when they're going? How do we draw the boundaries to accommodate one closure when we could be closing 2 or 3 as we move forward?
So I think that will definitely come next week, but the plan is to propose layered scenarios that all fit together. That way, if you closed A and B and C in future years, you wouldn't be disrupting the flow of students. It would just be purely staff moving for not a future move, if that makes sense. So it's not like we're going to redraw the boundaries now and then do it again later. And then it's not, it would be a part of a sequence plan.
Drawing the boundaries as the one with the expectation of these 2 closed or these 2 or these 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And then I lost it. I lost it. Never mind. Sorry.
Other questions?
Well, one that came up around Lane was, so what happens to Longfellow, right? And so we've talked about that, and that'll come up next week too, with the administrative offices. Is that a temporary place? So that we're not spending the $300,000 a year here anymore until we get a more permanent place. But Longfellow also, it would take some dollars to fit in the budget, but to knock it down and create a park, right? Create green space for that side of town could be a real, I think, asset for that neighborhood. Hold on the land, so the board keeps the land, and who knows what the future holds if you do have to build a school someday, if enrollment ever goes back the other direction. At least there's a piece of land you still own in the community. So those are just that initial thinking around, maybe what we do with a Longfellow building.
I remembered it.
Got it?
So it's off of what Jeff was saying, is that all of the work that you all have done with this and it being eye-opening and all of this information coming at you, is there a way we can, besides just our conversations, because we may not hit on all that you have done, is there a way to get that information, that what if statements, those scenarios
Like a
out?
blurb even, yeah.
Huh?
I was gonna ask the same thing.
Okay,
Yeah.
like out into, so that people can see, we have looked at this, we have looked at this, because one of the complaints we get, oh, we're not transparent, we don't know the decisions, we're doing this, that, and the other thing. You guys have run through all of this stuff. How do we get this out to tell people when we haven't maybe asked all of the questions, or we've led one way versus another of what you guys have already done? Because it's really important, because we saw all of the misinformation that was out there with the last communication that we were moving forward with. And so how do we get that so that doesn't happen? And how do we get this information out to everyone?
So these are being recorded, right? This workshop on Monday. And so that becomes, I think, a resource, and talk to Amanda about linking that in some communications. We did one letter to all of the families and staff. But it's, the larger group that aren't connected to the schools is really what we're trying to, so, and that's a little bit heavier lift, because unless we can get it into the social media platforms where, a lot of that.
Or the newspaper or the TV or radio or anywhere, like, can we get this where it's clearly communicated? And when somebody's like, well, what about this? Yeah, we did that. Look here.
Right.
So it's there, it's done.
Yeah, Amanda's in the Zoom meeting, so she's listening in. So she and I can touch base tomorrow, because she's developed some good relationships with reporters, and actually through the referendum, in the end, we did get some coverage that did a nice job of explaining the facts without it being tilted in any direction. So I think there's an opportunity for her to go back to, like, okay, here's a story now about the next phase of this. So we'll work on that.
Okay.
Are there presentations from your guys' committee meetings that could also be where you went through these scenarios and
This and next week are probably the most refined version of the presentations.
Yeah, but I think that we need the raw stuff too, because that's where people are be like, well, what if they're just hiding this, they're doing this, and it's, I want, so that we've shown everyone that we're clearly thinking about all this. I don't just believe that you have skipped things. I think that you've done a fantastic job, but how do we show the public that you've done that fantastic job?
Got it. Yep.
Or especially the families of the school specifically affected, to
Yeah.
say, here's how we came to this conclusion of your school. So they don't just think that, we picked a name out of a hat and said, well, you're the one that's getting put on the block. But to say, here's the categories we looked at, even if you do a mailer to their family of the sheet with the categories, just to say, here's what we looked at. These are the numbers of keeping it up, just to, if nothing else, at least for those families that are going to personally be affected and moved, to say, here's why. We just want you to realize these are the things we thought about for you, and just so that you don't think we're just shoving you somewhere else.
Yeah, so part of decision in later May, early June, with some consensus now, gives us some place to, like, oh, now we know where to go to do a presentation for families, right? Because we don't want, I don't want to do it in,
Transition.
you know,
Yeah.
get 11 elementary schools all wound up there.
Right,
Um,
right.
So that's why a little bit of this process is we feel a sense of direction coming from the board. Well, now we can go
Right.
to Longfellow, like, here's why. We can
Right,
go to
yeah.
Lane. And we've done some of those meetings already with staff.
Sure.
And I was at one of the elementaries that we'll talk about tomorrow, this morning, in fact. I mean, next Monday, sorry.
So with that in mind, if we have other questions specifically about Longfellow, not like how we're going to communicate on answer stuff, but this consolidation of Longfellow, do we have concerns about why Longfellow over another school? Does it make sense to the majority of the board? Again, thumbs up, consolidating Longfellow seems like something that we should do
Yeah.
if we're picking an elementary school. Joe? Are you thumbs up? Okay. Yeah, he's in the dark. Okay. So
It's a sunroom, what can I say?
More information, much more detailed information coming in on the next Monday's meeting, and I have some inside information because I attended the committee's last meeting, so I could have some information about it. So that's why I'm not asking as many questions maybe as you guys are all asking fantastic questions, and I'll tell you that the presentation that I saw in that committee meeting will answer every single one of them. So, but I'm sure that they love to get those questions too, to make sure that's included in that presentation. So with that done, we have a direction, right? And when would we expect to have an action item for that direction?
So I think that's a good one for you to remember for next week.
Okay.
It's like, when does the board want to have this come back for action? I mean, these two probably are not surprises, maybe for some families. And so in upcoming regular meetings, especially following the next workshop where we talk about a number of potential candidates, you can start to expect some public comment on it. And I've been through this in Milwaukee with school closures, and for elementaries in particular, it gets to be very emotional. And so just to kind of be ready for some of that as a board, you're going to hear things about, breaking up a family and all those kind of things that are real in schools, especially if they're effective schools. But the reality is, we know we have to go down this path, and we're not alone in it, right? So, Cudahy closed one, and then Tina said we're talking about another one already. So it is part of the work, and it comes with real emotion. So I think that'll be kind of what comes after the second workshop. And then depending on how that goes, is there more work in the community and or that we need to do with schools that are candidates before we get to decision making. So we're gonna have to feel our way through that a little bit. And I think it's gonna be you or who's ever the president to start saying, okay, we're ready to go now with a decision, whether that's late May, early June. Love to have it done no later than the end of June. Yeah, so we get a full kind of year to really plan into the transition for the first two.
Are you looking to have all of the decision together, or do you want to have Longfellow and Lane in one decision and whatever other decision might be at another time? Especially if two are easier than.
Right, it could be split up, and then we know for sure these two are moving forward.
Because I'm only thinking of time here.
Right.
So if these two are happening in 1 year, 1 school year's time, essentially, then the sooner we get that going, if there's other work, communication, all the stuff that was kind of brought up here, that can start sooner too.
Right. But yeah, we could make it in 2 steps, decision steps or action steps.
Right.
Okay.
Any other questions? Joe? Oh, he's good.
Getting feisty. Sorry.
All right, so if nothing else, thank you so much. I'm sorry.
Just with that, the next step slide.
Oh, next step.
Yeah. So that brings us to our last stop on our roadmap tonight, and that's next steps. And so then the workshop on May 2nd, discussion of criteria to rank remaining elementary schools. Again, looking at the least number of students affected, the increased costs of busing, CIP costs, the conceptual costs of additions or renovation for each of those sites. Then the redrawn boundary lines for elementary and/or intermediate schools. Possible identification of 2 additional elementary schools for consolidation. And then come up with a recommendation, and then discussion of the consolidation timeline.
You'll have the PowerPoint for next Monday will come on Friday. Yeah, so we have a little bit of time with it.
All right, are we good? All right, I look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion adjourned.
Moved and seconded. Any other questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Joe, you good?
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.